control panel.
Hello and welcome everyone to today's Association for Manufacturing Excellence webinar titled When Lean Doesn't Stick and What to Do About It. I am Jerry Strohmeyer, the Education and Training Program Coordinator for AME, and I will be your moderator. Today's presenter is Becky Morgan, the President of Fulcrum ConsultingWorks Inc. Her thought leadership is expressed through consulting, writing, and speaking the Johnny Appleseed of Manufacturing Operations Strategy. Before founding her consulting business in 1990, Becky was an operations executive in the aerospace, food, and banking industries. In addition to her book, Strategic Profits, Becky has been the operations expert for numerous business journals, including Inc. Magazine, Industry Week, American City Business Journals, and AME Publications. Becky has also served on the AME national and regional boards for over 10 years. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping items. You will be in listen-only mode throughout the webinar. You will see that you are muted on your attendee panel on the right side of your screen. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them into your question area in the attendee panel and click on Submit. We'll review the questions at the end of today's presentation and answer as many as we can. When you log off today, please check your email inbox, and it will be an invitation and link to fill out a short webinar attendee survey. Please take a few minutes to complete the survey today, as your feedback is very important to us to improve future webinars. Becky has also graciously agreed to provide a PDF of today's presentation. We will be sending that along with a recorded link for a webinar replay to each of you next week. Now I am pleased to introduce Becky Morgan, who will present When Lean Doesn't Stick and What to Do About It. Take it away, Becky.
Thank you, Jerry. Many of you in the audience have a green thumb. That means you can make plants grow and your yards look beautiful. I, on the other hand, have what's known as a black thumb. I can kill any plant that tries to grow. Some of you may share my incompetence. With my lack of passion and understanding, it's easy for me to conclude that stuff just won't grow in my yard. Similarly, a lot of companies try lean and decide it doesn't apply to them. Having a lousy yard and wanting a nicer one is similar to manufacturing companies wanting to become more competitive using lean. In both cases, we often start by reading books and articles and talking with friends to see what they suggest. To garden, we all know to pay attention to water and sun. It sounds simple, but it doesn't always work for any number of reasons. Lean sounds simple too. Many people naively suggest that it is common sense. It is not. In both cases, gardening and manufacturing, we try based on what we've been told. We may have some limited success, but it's inconsistent and it's easy to get frustrated. Many just quit at that point. We may try to focus on a few specific plants that come recommended as unkillable, or on specific tools like 5S that others say are the place to start. Again, we have some limited success, and yet we become frustrated. Again, many just quit at this point. Plants just won't grow in this yard. Lean doesn't work here. There are a lot of companies doing lean, and all of us feel that somehow it should be able to help us. Let's invest a minute in reaching a common understanding, if only for the next 50 minutes, what lean really is before we discuss why it might not stick and what we should do about it. This slide is straight from Toyota. I got it from them in the year 2000, so it's 16 years old. They used it in their own presentations in describing what the Toyota production system, or what I refer to as lean, really is. The TPS is an organizational culture. It's an integrated system, all of which focuses on human development. There are three sides to it: the technical aspects, the managerial aspects, and the philosophical aspects. But they are all focused on human development. we'll take a minute to look at each one of these sidelines and how often lean doesn't stick for technical reasons, for managerial reasons, and for philosophical reasons. This slide is a more recent one. It's just a year or two old, and I pulled it straight off of their website. This is how Toyota describes the Toyota way. Continuous improvement, which is challenge, Kaizen, and go see. My Japanese isn't very good, so I'll go with the English translation. And then respect for people, respect and teamwork. You see throughout the Toyota way, whenever Toyota is talking, they are talking about respect for people. They are talking about developing people. And a lot of us in Lean forget that most important aspect. So what is Lean or TPS? It is a thinking system. A thinking system that includes tools. Lean is not a system of tools. We have difficulty inferring the entire system by just learning a few of the tools. TPS is like breathing to Toyota. The Toyota Way, which was an effort to codify the system, was not written or published until 50 years after TPS had been developed. Obviously, TPS continues to be enhanced by Toyota today. Think of it this way. Gardening is understanding soils, sun, moisture, microclimates, and plants. Not just one aspect of those, and certainly not just shovels, rakes, and mulch. People who have a green thumb have passion. They have an understanding of the entire system, and they know how and when to use tools. They also study what works and what doesn't, and they make subtle changes, some of which work and some of which don't. They continually work to get better and get as much out of the system that they have as they can. It's fun, it's learning, it's growing. Lean is a thinking system. Trying to apply a few tools that you've been exposed to is not the same as implementing Lean any more than me using a shovel and spreading around some weed killer makes me a gardener. I'm not even sure what's a weed and what's a plant trying to burst through. It's hard for me to learn because I am not that interested and I don't know enough. One of the tough parts of the Lean fails problem is it's difficult to determine exactly what parts are relevant and necessary to you. And do we even know how to use those parts if we know which ones apply? Now, if we don't agree on the problem, we'll never agree on the solution. So if we're going to talk about how to make Lean stick, we need to have some common understanding of what the problem is. That is why it doesn't stick. Over 75% of companies that try Lean quit completely within 2 years. Another 20% plateau and drift, in and out. Boards are there, they're up to date, then they're not current. We're trying, but then we lose focus for a while. 5% keep making progress, with under 1% of those truly ingraining Lean thinking within the organization. So if we want to fix the problem of Lean not sticking, let's talk about a few things that might be the problem. As with any problem solving, we need to get to root cause. Now, while this is answerable with generalities, the real problem for each of your companies may be different one from the other. What to do about it may also vary. But I'm going to give you information, and you can tell what fits and what doesn't fit, and my recommendations you would apply accordingly. So let's focus on understanding why Lean doesn't stick. I mentioned the three sides of the triangle on the Toyota slide. One of them was technical. So what are the technical weeds in your lean garden? The two that I see most commonly are that we blindly copy Toyota tools. We try to copy paste. And the second is that we don't let go of the old ways. That won't work. Toyota did not have you or your problems in mind when it developed its tools to solve its problems. Now, I can't tell a weed from a budding plant. So if something comes up that I didn't expect, I yank it out and throw it in the trash. I assume it didn't belong. I'm wasting opportunities to learn when I do that, but I don't have anybody next door to help me learn and understand. I should question and work to improve and learn more. Instead, I've hired a gardener. Unfortunately, with lean, that's not an option for you guys. You cannot outsource lean. It has to become part of who we are and how we think. So you have to have an interest in it and a commitment to learning, to observing, and to improving. Now, some companies will try Kanban because they think it seems simple and makes sense, but they don't pull the plug on MRP for those same items. Now, why on earth would I want to have two different scheduling and inventory control systems for an item, and those systems are based on different assumptions? Now, some of us would argue, well, I want to see if Kanban works before I unplug MRP. Well, and that makes some sense, so do some tests, but then let go of MRP calculations that are telling you what to order and when. Be aware that in most software, electronic Kanban is simply MRP working slightly differently. So make sure that you understand the tools. Don't just copy and paste. What is the problem you are trying to solve? And let's say that it has to do with scheduling and inventory control. Is Kanban the right approach? And if so, how would you do it to solve your problems? Looking at a Toyota Kanban card is of no value when you're trying to solve your problems. Now there are managerial weeds, and believe me, these can become a real thicket. I should know. I was once the antithesis of the lean executive. I was convinced I had the answers and all my people needed was for me to share them. Then in 1984, I think it was, I had one of those life-altering experiences and my views and behavior changed drastically. I learned that my behavior as a manager had to change and that my current management system could no longer work. I also learned that my views of managers having the answers were completely wrong. I had to change my belief system. So expecting lean to fit into the current management system won't work. Next, a lot of people try to focus on point versus value stream optimization. Value stream is not the way we've traditionally thought in manufacturing. It's not the way we're organized structurally. And it's easy to say there's a problem over there, go fix it. And in fact, my one problem with our Six Sigma friends is that we often focus on a point optimization, which results in no overall improvement to the value stream. If you're familiar with theory of constraints, you know that throughput is controlled by the bottleneck. If you increase the output of non-bottleneck operations, that's nice, but it doesn't change throughput. So we really need to understand value streams before we start scattering around improvement projects all over the company. Now, a lot of managers expect a quick fix rather than a transformational process. That's like spreading seeds on the ground without any cultivation or strategy, and certainly without understanding how shade and shadows can affect success. Sub-optimization versus optimization is an important distinction. We have to understand how it all works together. The third common managerial weed is a culture of blame. And in a culture of blame, we hide problems. If you're going to say it's my fault, I'm not going to tell you what happened. So we need to look at the process and not people. Blame should be on a poorly designed process, not the people who designed it, not the people who execute it. But we need to understand the process and what the process is capable of delivering. So blame cannot be on a person. And you have to build a culture where problems are open and willingly shared. That will not happen if you blame me. You will never find a lean culture where problems are hidden. You'll find plenty of cultures where problems are hidden and they are trying a few lean tools, but they're a long way from being lean. We also, in management, often focus on people and KPIs or key performance indicators rather than the process. We have a lack of belief that process and people and a vigorous learning focus will drive results. I look at my garden and I say, if I don't see things blooming, this gardening thing must not be working. I have zero appreciation for what's going on underneath the ground. I have zero appreciation for what happens as these seeds begin to push through in tiny plants and begin to surface. We have to focus on process. Now, the last managerial weed is a touchy one, but I will tell you it is a very important one. Standard costs. Most manufacturing companies operate on a standard cost system. Even job shops that try to apply cost to jobs use a lot of assumptions that lead lean leaders to make bad decisions. Standard costs were developed on large batch assumptions. They made sense at the time. They were the best we could come up with. But things have changed. Lean success in a standard cost environment often shows negative results. When I work with companies and we will initially reduce inventories, I have to make sure that we look at their software, their accounting, and how they account for overhead, how much money they have tied up in inventory, WIP, etc. Because the initial few months may show a negative impact on profits, even though we're doing the right thing. This is kind of like trying to grow winter plants in the summer. Standard costs just don't work with small batch sizes. And in lean, we're trying to get to a lot size of 1 with flow. I understand you have to pay overhead. I understand you have to account for it. But that doesn't mean you want money tied up in inventory. So I would encourage you to get familiar at some point on your journey with lean accounting, contribution margin accounting, and other ways of looking at your cost systems so that they don't get in the way of your lean process. Now the philosophical weeds. These two are tough. Most of us work for companies that somebody owns, whether it's a bunch of people spread throughout the stock market or an individual family. It's easy to say the company is owned by the owner. He can do whatever he wants with it. And legally, that's true. But if you want to become lean, we can't treat the company that way. The company has to belong to all stakeholders, not legally, but philosophically and behaviorally. Now, where I see this as a problem most often is new ownership or new management comes in and lean is dead. That new VP of Ops or that new COO doesn't know anything about lean, doesn't value lean, tried lean and it didn't work, and he's going to change things. When a company is subject to that kind of massive change based on a change in ownership or leadership, it's going to be difficult to become lean, because lean is about the people. It is about developing people first and foremost. It is about developing process. And when those things happen, money will flow. The second philosophical weed that I often see is that people are an expense. Pretty easy to believe that. You look at accounting reports every month, and there on the cost side is a line item called labor, and it's got a bunch of dollars associated with it. And there may be another line called salary, and it's got a bunch of dollars associated with it. So when you're told you have to cut costs, you look at those other lines and you say, I'm not quite sure how improving process will make those other things get smaller, but I know if I whack some employees, this one will go down. That's no way to become a lean operation. It's no way to reflect Toyota production system thinking. We have to value and respect people, not consider them a line item on the cost section of a P&L. Another challenge that companies face philosophically is they may have no bigger purpose than making money. Now that's fairly small-minded, and it's hard for employees to be motivated. Now when I'm the owner of a company and it's my money, I like making money. And no lean organization is against that. There just needs to be more to it. So if your organization has no bigger purpose than making money, it's going to be difficult to get all of your employees to pitch in with all their love and passion and effort to make it better. Next are companies that talk about, we want to do lean. Lean is not an action. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of being. You will become lean or not. And becoming lean doesn't mean what a lot of people say, squeeze as much productivity out of as few people as possible. That's not lean at all. That's cutthroat and that's short term. So when I talk about a lean organization, I'm talking about one that believes in the Toyota system, the Toyota approach. And Toyota is not the only company doing this. They're not the only ones successful. They're just the ones that most people know about and have heard of. So that's why I use them as that touchstone. The next philosophical weed is a focus on numbers, not learning. This is a focus on ends, not means. And ignoring means won't last. When we do whatever it takes to hit the numbers, we're doing whatever it takes. And quite often, that doesn't involve respect for people. It quite often doesn't involve what's best for our customers, our supply chain partners, our community, or the government that provides our infrastructure. It's easier for executives to just look at the numbers, but we really need to focus on learning Are we learning day after day after day? Because that and only that is the way that numbers get better over time. Now, those, I believe, are the primary reasons that I see why lean doesn't stick. So some of you may have said every one of those describes us, and some of you may have said, well, there's really only one of them there that describes us. And that's okay, because each company is different. But if we want lean to stick, we do need to understand the problem, and we do need to get to root cause. So be sure you're thinking about that as we now move forward into a conversation about how to eliminate those weeds and how to make lean stick. It's much easier to behave our way to different thinking than to think our way into different behavior. We know what we need to do, but to do it is difficult. So there are a lot of ways that you could choose to move forward. The two I am recommending are not the only two, but I think they're a very good place to start. And I'll explain both and why I believe they fit together so nicely. Relentless problem solving is a great way to make lean stick in your company. When you have problems, employees get frustrated and they get tired. And sadly, at some point, they just learn to accept them and live with them. We don't want that. We want employees to see that problems are making their jobs more difficult than they need to be, which adds time, cost, inefficiencies, potential quality problems, etc. We want to solve problems. In doing this, we can develop a just-in-time understanding and application of tools to meet your needs in solving real problems. If your inventory and scheduling system is not your biggest problem, Kanban probably doesn't make sense as a place to start. 5S may or may not. Are your people wasting a lot of time looking for tools that they can't find? Are they having difficulty finding inventory? If those are the case, then maybe it's time for some in-depth understanding of 5S, and maybe we put it in place not just because, but for the express purpose of eliminating those frustrating problems. In relentless problem solving, we develop people. We learn to observe, to think better, to question. We learn to work on facts, not opinions. That's absolutely crucial to decision making. We all have opinions. I've probably got a couple on most topics, but we have to deal with facts, and that is a learned skill. It's not something that all of your employees do or all of your leadership does just by nature. And next, under relentless problem solving, we can create a learning environment. As we understand our problems and we look at tools to apply to help us solve them, we are developing our people, and we are thinking, and we are learning. We're no longer accepting things as just the way it is. So in this learning environment, when you are executing problem solving, ask, what have we learned? How did that specific 5S application help us solve our problems? And how can we use that thinking to solve other problems? And how did we ensure that this problem doesn't resurface later? A lot of things are temporary if we don't stay on top of them. We need to make sure that our problem solving actually drives the problem from the business instead of just hiding it. The second major capability I would encourage you to develop to get lean to stick is Lean Management System. It will help you reinforce lean behaviors consistently and daily. Now, I don't care which problem-solving technique you use, A3, 8D, 5Y, I don't care what it is. The mechanical system isn't nearly as crucial as a disciplined process that uses facts and creates embedded learning. We have to get to true root cause. Tools were created by Toyota only to solve problems. So when you have a problem, and through some methodology, you have figured out the root cause, then and only then do we look to see if one of the Toyota tools can help us drive it from our business. There may well be one that will, but you still won't be able to copy-paste. You'll have to understand the tool well enough to modify it to work in your company. Tools fulfill a need. They're not just to use. Don't just shovel to do it. You're working the soil, and you're working the soil for a reason. Now, we'll also look at Lean Management System in a minute. That's a more advanced process that a lot of companies don't know. And I'll tell you, the reason I find most companies don't use it is because it requires changes in the behavior of management. And as much as they might want to, they find that very difficult to do. Not as difficult to tell operators to change their behavior as it is to change our own. So let's take a minute at problem solving. If you understand why lean is not sticking in your company, then you need to use a problem solving process to eliminate that problem so it can and will stick. So first and foremost, demand fact-based information. I don't care how passionately an opinion is held. If it's not fact-based, it's an opinion. Out to be right, but I wouldn't bet my business on it. Next, make sure that you have an unbiased problem statement. Now, I find in a lot of organizations, when we're working on solving a problem, and we try to brainstorm potential root cause, what they really do is brainstorm potential solutions to some not understood problem. And similarly, our problem statements tend to have our solution built into them. If we say that we have too many employees in this company, that's hardly an unbiased problem statement. There's only one solution, and that solution is to get rid of employees. If we say that our costs are too high, we are not meeting our target costs, and we need to figure out what to do about that, that's a very different problem statement with a much broader group of potential solutions. So we need to understand real root cause. We need to have facts. We need to have an unbiased problem statement. And then next, our real learning opportunity comes by identifying the expected impact of any change. Now, most companies skip this, and they're skipping a tremendous opportunity to learn. I don't want to offend you, but here it comes. No one in your company understands fully your processes. Now, why do I say that? Because if you did, you could predict with 100% accuracy what change A would create in variable B. In over 40 years, I've never seen a company that could do that. So when you're looking at solving problems and you're looking at making a change to solve that problem, take the time to say, now, what impact do we think this will have? Will this eliminate the problem completely? Will it reduce it by 50%? Why do we believe that? What are our assumptions that make us think that we will have this impact from this change? And by identifying that expected impact, and then after you make the change, you evaluate and learn, your company will grow. You will know more about your processes, about your assumptions, and about what change really does than you can possibly know today. So after you've made the change, compare the real result to the predicted result, and don't say, hey, it was even better than we expected, thank God, let's move on. Let's learn from that. Let's learn from every problem that we work on solving. This is how we think about the process. This is how we improve it. This is how we understand it better. And this is how we drive problems from our businesses forever. Now let's move on to the lean management system. A lean management system has three primary components. One is visual controls. The second is daily accountability. And the third is leader standard work. Now, I'm going to give you a brief introduction in this conversation, but I strongly encourage you to take a look at the book by David Mann, Creating a Lean Culture. David would shyly deny this, but I think he's the #1 expert in how lean management systems can be effective and how they can be used to create a lean culture. His book does a great job of explaining each of these elements, what they look like, how they can work together. So I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version now, but again, I encourage you to use it because if you want lean to stick, you're going to find a lean management system critical to your efforts. Now, we said that visual controls is one of those aspects of a lean management system. On the left here, you see a whiteboard with some different folders and containers with a calendar with some different output in different colors. Now, I see a lot of companies put in visual controls on whiteboards like this, and I certainly don't object to that. But when you're using a whiteboard, the first question is, who's your audience? Who's this information for? What information do they need? And what timing is important? I see a lot of boards that get updated at the end of every day or the end of every shift or the end of every week. Well, that's great information, but it doesn't help me make a change while reality is rearing its ugly head. So on all of your visual controls, make sure that we know that the information is valuable, that it is being used, and that it helps us make better decisions. Now, on the bottom right, you see what is, I see a lot of now, especially in places that don't have room, they'll put up these four-sided cubes that have quality on one side, cost on another, safety on another. They end up with their 4 key variables there summarized. Again, this is great information, but let's make sure that the information is for an audience that is going to use it and that the information is timely and accurate to lead to better decisions. Now, in the top right, you see a couple of gauges, and you see that part of those gauges, the readout has red. The gauge to the leftmost has a dial in the red arena. Now, this is a great visual control. There's a lot of ways to make this even more effective than it is, but right now, anyone who sees that knows to immediately call maintenance. We are not trying to replace the jobs of the maintenance people. We're not trying to outsource maintenance. We're not trying to do any of that. We're trying to put in place visual controls so that we can see normal from abnormal at a glance and take appropriate action. Now, I've seen these kinds of gauges with yellow in them also, and green. And in green means it's where it should be. Yellow means caution, call maintenance, and red means shut down the equipment. Your company would design whatever makes sense to you, but a visual control should communicate important information that helps people make better decisions on a more timely basis. Now, I like to say there's a 10-second rule. It's not the same as the 5 seconds when you drop your food on the floor. This one is a 10-second rule. And this means that when your CEO, your COO, your plant manager, or I walk through your operations, we should be able to tell normal from abnormal at a glance in 10 seconds. I shouldn't have to walk through and look at 10 different charts in each of 25 different cells to understand what's going on. We need a quick way to see what's happening, what should be happening, and what's not. It can be as simple as putting a sign on a piece of equipment that's not running that says not scheduled today. That tells me the fact that it's not running is a normal condition for it today. It's not indicative of a problem. There are a lot of visual ways to communicate important information to improve decision making. A second aspect of the lean management system is daily accountability. And daily means daily, and accountability means accountability. Now, typically these are brief stand-up meetings that are implemented tier by tier. They'll start, I will say, for example, 7 a.m., tier 1, every team within the organization has their startup meeting. They want to understand what are the problems. Then anything that they can't solve themselves, they need to elevate and get help at tier 2. The tier 2 people then pick up that information. They look at those problems. They solve what they can. Whatever they can't, they elevate to the next tier for that kind of help. When we say we want decisions made and problems solved at the lowest part of the organization where it can be done, this is elevating problems that can't be solved at the lowest level, and they need to move up a bit. So this daily accountability is an assessment of problems getting in our way. It is assignments about how we're going to resolve those challenges, and it is follow-up. It is providing accountability for commitments that were made. Now, this is not micromanagement. I've had several operations leaders tell me they trust their people. They don't need this kind of system. This is telling them what to do. This is micromanagement. That's not what daily accountability is. Daily accountability is constantly following up to make sure that we are all doing what we said we would do to drive problems from our business forever. There has to be accountability. It has to be daily. That doesn't mean that you are saying, I will have this problem solved tomorrow. It may mean that you say, by tomorrow, I will have contacted the vendor to see if they have any indication of a problem in their facilities. But then tomorrow, I want to hold you accountable for keeping that commitment that you've made. The daily part gets tough for managers, but it's important. Otherwise, it's like every other change we've tried to make, it will just drift. Now, leader standard work is the third component of a lean management system. We don't have any problem giving our hourly people standardized work instructions and having standard expectations for what they need to do every hour. But somehow when it comes to management, we think it doesn't apply to us. In fact, for a portion of our job, it is extremely important that we apply standard work to us. It is a means to reinforce priorities and to demonstrate actual management interest and involvement in our lean execution system. An hourly person may have 100% of their day accounted for by standard work. A CEO may have 5% of their day. But we do need to hold ourselves accountable. So this leader standard work document will specify work content related to improvement. It's a daily focus on process. And it is a tool for accountability, and I insist, a tool for learning. I've seen a lot of organizations with leader standard work that is a checklist, and they check things off as they do them. And I think when you're really good and when you're really honest, that can work. But I think when you're first getting started, it's important to take notes. My daily standard work for today might say, stop by cells 3 and 6 and make sure that all problems are being addressed currently. I'm busy. I don't really have time. So I may make a quick run through 3 and 6 and check them off. I may see that they're not actually keeping everything current there, but I check it off. So I really like to force notes on our leader standard work. It helps us support trends. We can identify systemic problems that way, and it helps us as leaders learn. So I'm not against checklists. I think they just don't let us learn as much as we'd like to. So a lean management system has these 3 components. If you only put in place visual controls and daily accountability, but you don't have leader standard work, you'll have an inconsistent lean management system. If you have daily accountability and leader standard work, but no visual controls, you'll be driving blind. If you have visual controls and leader standard work, but no daily accountability, you'll be slow. It is only when you have all 3 in place working together that you can have an effective lean management system. So what is Toyota Production System, or what is lean? It is a culture. It is certainly a culture that employs tools to help standardize problem solving, but it is not a set of tools. It has technical aspects, managerial aspects, philosophical aspects, and all of this is to develop a culture focused on human development. And by doing that, by understanding the complete system of philosophy, management behaviors, and technical considerations, together we can accomplish great things. So if you want lean to stick, number 1, you have to respect all stakeholders. You have to respect them. That doesn't mean you ask them what their kids' names are. It means you feel guilty when you see them wasting valuable time and energy looking for things that should be right where they need them. When you see them not using their capability to make our processes better. You need to respect all stakeholders and help them eliminate problems. Don't expect them to live with them. You listen and you focus on the process. As leaders, we need to learn to ask good questions and then ask them. And we need to learn and help others learn. And we need a lean management system that does not rest. The lean management system is what ensures that our lean execution system is working. So we have to have all these things in place. You don't have to have 5S. You don't have to have Kanban. You don't have to have SMED. You have to have what makes sense in your organization to respect people and drive problems from your company. When you do this, your profits will grow. When your boss wants to ask what's the bottom line impact, tell them that solving problems, reinforcing focus on priorities and respect, all of these drive increased profitability over what we would have without them. I would like to thank each of you for your time today, and I think we have a little while for questions.
Great. Thank you, Becky. And now, as Becky mentioned, we'll review any questions. So if you do have any questions, please submit them on the right side of your screen. And our first question is, regarding your standard cost point, what are 2 or 3 of the bad decisions that can be made if using standard cost models?
Well, as an example, keep in mind that standard cost, the biggest problem with it is the allocation of overhead to products, to departments, to areas. So we make decisions. We say that a product is profitable or not based on its standard product margin. In fact, that's largely a function of made-up numbers. I know that cost accountants don't like to hear me say that, but overhead is a best guess estimate of what certain costs will be next year. Then we choose to allocate those on some, I'm going to say logical but arbitrary basis, square feet, whatever it is, units. If we do it on units, that's based on some forecast of how many units there will be next year. There's no real analysis of what those costs are associated with and what costs will go away if those products, departments, or inventory goes away. So specific bad decisions that can be made are often related to one, inventory, because when I reduce inventory, I'm not absorbing my overhead absorption. And so it looks like I'm starting to not make as much money or lose money. So I make stupid inventory investments. I'm sure all of you have seen where we have crap inventory sitting around that's taken space that we shouldn't have, but accounting doesn't want to let us get rid of it. That's a standard cost bad decision. Another one has to do with profitability of products. It's really outside of the scope of what I wanted to talk about today. But when we're looking at the profit margin of products, standard costs will lead to bad decisions. They will lead us to price incorrectly to the market. They will lead us to bad decisions on what products we should keep and what products we should get rid of. I hope that helps.
Okay, great. Our next question is, value stream managers do not have time for improvement activities. Supervisors and team leads escalates daily issue that cannot be fixed under their control. What would be the best approach?
Well, you don't really have value stream managers because a value stream manager has no bigger priority than helping solve problems. So there's an issue there with the value stream manager, and perhaps that person is reflecting the expectations of their boss, and it may be that their boss doesn't understand the importance of making that time. And that, again, is part of a lean culture. Supervisors clearly have to make time to help solve problems, but if we're the supervisor of 2 different departments and we can't do it alone, we need our bosses or the value stream manager's help, they have to make the time. Now, I don't know your specific situation. I don't know if this is an individual or if he's being driven by his management and told he doesn't have time, but I would encourage you to raise the issue that we can't drive these problems without his help. I would also encourage you not to be a victim. There are problems that you can drive out without his help. So don't just sit back and cross your legs and arms and say, we can't do anything because of him or her. Do everything you can within your power to solve the problems. But those that require his help, his support, his assistance, make sure that that information gets elevated in a way that's constructive. I would encourage you to have the conversation with him first, that you understand that all his responsibilities are important, but so is this. but do not be the victim. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. Our next one, what are your thoughts, experience on using a change management approach to transformation to lean culture?
Well, that's an interesting question, because one of the things I've just described is part of a change management approach. Change management approach is, in my world, kind of a generic term for how we need to change a million things around here. How are we going to do it? And I've seen it range from project management, which I don't think is change management approach, to putting executives in charge of certain aspects, calling them, I forget what the common term is, but we make them champions of different aspects. So I will tell you that in transforming to a lean culture, it is massive change. It is massive change mostly for companies that don't naturally respect people, who don't naturally deal with facts, who don't naturally solve problems. So it's less so for those who already try to do those things and are just trying to use lean as their specific cultural environment. So yes, transforming to lean absolutely takes change management expertise. I've just suggested that you use a lean management system and that you use problem solving as ways to begin the transition to lean. But even those simple suggestions can't be made without an understanding of how to effectively manage change in an organization. The question we had just a minute ago about a value stream manager who doesn't have time to get involved and help solve problems is an example of where change management would need to get involved and help. It's a common struggle, and it's a place where your change management tools or techniques would have to be effective.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our next one is, do you have an example of a point improvement versus a value stream approach?
Sure. If you think, and I'm going to say, as an example, I'm going to just talk about an assembly line only because more people can relate to that than any other kind of process. So let's say that we have an assembly line that makes Bic pens, cheap little 19-cent Bic pens. So we've got injection molding coming along, spitting these things out, and we've got ink filling tubes, and we've got somebody putting tubes. I'm sure it's machine done, but in any case, we have people putting tubes of ink into the pen body. We then have somebody put caps on. If we make a drastic improvement in how well we can put caps on, and by that I mean the efficiency, but we can't put the filled ink device into the plastic body that quickly, or it's uneven, so the new system that we put in place won't work because it doesn't fit on the pen correctly. That's a point improvement that has no real impact on the complete throughput of that value stream. I'm not saying it's not worth doing at some level. I'm saying that it won't improve your throughput, it won't reduce your costs, etc. So hopefully that's an example that everybody can kind of picture in their minds and relate to. But generically, fully generically, a point improvement means a specific place in a value stream where we're going to make that specific task better. And a value stream, and that's what you're doing. When you're improving the value stream, you're trying to improve flow. And you may well do that by improving multiple tasks along the value stream. But you want to make sure that there's a strategy here and that we understand when we improve this point and this point and this point, they add up to an improvement in the entire value stream. So hopefully that makes sense. I used the scattered seeds in the garden as an example because it's nice. I'm glad they're out there, and maybe some things will grow and be pretty, but it certainly won't be a beautiful garden. and it's the same thing with point versus value stream improvement. You may do a bunch of random acts of kindness, random acts of lean, and they may have some good results, but they're not going to have the same results you would have if you had a strategic value stream approach to how you make improvements.
Okay, great. Can you provide some examples of leader standard work for director and VP levels?
I would like to refer you to David Mann's book. Yes, I can do that personally, but I'm going to tell you that David Mann's book and I think his website have examples that you'll find better. Again, at a director and VP level, there's a lot to be done, and David has done some recent work, and I'm not sure if he's got articles. I don't think this is in his latest book, but it might be, about exactly how we need to get those people involved and teach them what they're looking at on the shop floor. So there are ways that we need to get them involved, and in doing that, we would develop their leader standard work as well. It might be, depending on the size of the operation, etc., that we want a VP of operations to visit a cell, a different cell, once a week. We may want a VP of operations on his leader standard work to sit in on a problem-solving team work session once a week. So it's things that reinforce the behavior, but that aren't, we're certainly not going to expect them to go look at every cell every day and read every chart every day. But again, I would encourage you to go to David Mann's website and check out his book for a lot more in-depth examples, or you're free to email me directly, but I think the research is there that that'll get you a quick head start.
Okay, we got two more. Hopefully we can just squeeze them in. How can an inventory system promote learning? Because
there's questions about why do we keep inventory, how do we store it, how do we handle it, why do we have problems with inventory in-house, with it fitting, with it not fitting. We get inventory that arrives from suppliers in certain packaging that may work for the supplier but not for us. So there's just a lot to learn by the concept of inventory, by the quantities, the storage, but also the physical handling, and learning how our process interacts with that physical inventory, whether it's a component, a raw material, a finished good, or whatever. There are tremendous opportunities to learn from just examining inventory.
Okay, and our last question is, lean has to use both sides of your brain, heart and head. Dominant thinking on metrics and analytics can sometimes have a weaker people-heart focus. Whole thinking leaders are required. What do you think?
Why don't you ask, what do I feel? In any case, I'm the perfect example of that because I'm a highly quantitative person. My degrees are in economics, mathematics, etc., up through PhD level stuff. I love numbers, I value numbers. And it's not until, I always liked people, but I didn't value and respect them in a meaningful way until I had that life-changing experience that I referred to. And I had to learn to use that other side of me. And I have to work hard to continually develop that other side of me. It's become much more natural over the months and years, and now I have to say decades. But I had to consciously work on it. So again, to solve a problem, we have to identify it and identify the root cause. And the root cause in this case may be that it's not natural for us to think about and love numbers, or it's not natural for us to think about and love our people, knowing that all people are capable of great things. So if that's the root cause, then we have to figure out how to work on it and make it become more natural.
Okay, great, and thank you for answering all the questions. Appreciate that. And thank you, everyone, for your questions. That was great. And thank you, Becky, for a very insightful presentation. This brings our webinar to a close. Our next scheduled webinar will be on Thursday, July 7th, titled Lean Thinking in Office and Service Environments with Bo Keith. Please visit AME.org under the AME Events and Training tab for more information and to register. Please don't forget to fill out the short survey that will be in your inbox. Thank you everyone for attending and have a productive day.